Namaskar. Welcome to EPG Pathshala for Japanese Studies. I am Dr. Shashibala, an expert on Japanese Buddhism and presently working as Dean, Center of Indology, Bharati Vidya Bhavan. Bharati Vidya Bhavan is an organization that is dedicated to education. Now, soon it's going to complete its 80 years. The topic for today's lecture is Amitabha in Japan. Amitabha is one of the great Buddhas. One of the Buddhas, the name Amitabha means immeasurable light. In Japan, he is called Amita. Sometimes they call it Amida. We'll come to it later on that why Amitabha became Amida Nyorai in Japan. There are a number of Buddhas in Japanese Buddhism. Number one is Shakyamuni, but later on there are so many Buddhas developed in the Mahayana pantheon of Japan. Amitabha sits normally in mandalas with Vairochana as the central deity. The paradise of Amitabha is called Sukhavati. Amitabha is also known as the savior of all kinds of humanity, all levels of human beings. So that is why when I'll show you the mandalas of Amitabha, you will see that 9 levels of human beings are saved by Amitabha. Amitabha in Japan can be seen in many forms, in many manifestations. He is one of the Buddhas. He can be venerated as a single deity like in Byodoin temple. His images were made for many reasons. So one by one we will talk about the different forms of Amitabha and also why such forms are created and Okay. It's enough? It's enough. Okay, so you can later edit it, huh? Yeah. Amitabha Nyorai, Amida Nyorai, the Buddha of immeasurable light, sits with Asuku Nyorai, Akshobhya. The other Buddha is Amoghasiddhi, Fukukonzaku Nyorai. Still another is Ratnasambhava. The light of Amitabha outshines all the Buddhas. This explains his quality of Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra. Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra in Japanese is called Muryojukyo. It says that the light of Buddha shines with immeasurable brilliance in the countries of 10 directions, and in no place is it obstructed. He presides over the Western paradise, and the name of that paradise is Sukhavati. Sukhavati means the land of eternal bliss. Chinese pilgrims have referred in their memoirs to the devotion of Amitabha in India. They have mentioned about the shrines dedicated to him. Authors like Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, etc. have spoken about him. Devotion to Amitabha is basically based on a few sutras. Number one I would like to talk about is larger Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra. There is another that is called shorter Sukhavati Amitabha's, and there is another that is called Amitayur Dhyana Sutra. There was a Parthian prince, his name was Anshikau, who introduced the tradition of dedication, veneration to Amitabha into Chinese. And from there it was carried to Japan. Amitayur Dhyana Sutra first was translated by a scholar. His name was Kala Yashas. He is from 4th century. Again, in 7th century, a commentary was written by another scholar. His name is Shantao. Shantao systematized the Pure Land thought in China. His writings were known in Japan during the Nara period. In Japan, Amitabha is often known as Amida Nyorai. Nowhere in Sanskrit documents do we find the name reduced to Amita or Amida, which would correspond to this epitaph. The larger Sukhavati View Sutra mentions him as Amitabha, except once as Amitayur. Amitayur actually is the Buddha of a long life, Amit Ayur, and Amitabha is the Buddha of immeasurable light. So these two names are combined in Japan. The Japanese abbreviation of both the names Amitabha and Amitayus, it became Amida. Amitayus is the Buddha of immeasurable light, and Amitayus is the Buddha of immeasurable life, while Amitabha is the Buddha of immeasurable light. Life of this Buddha and of his people lasts for immeasurable and ultimate periods. Asankhya kalpa in Sanskrit it is said, and therefore he is called Amitayus. The Amida Nyorai, Tathagat Amitayus, is translated as Muryoju Nyorai, meaning immeasurable life, and Tathagat Amitabha as Muryo Kyo Nyorai, meaning immeasurable light. In later times, the two Sanskrit names were transliterated as Amitayus, Amidabha, and U and V were omitted to give the name Amida. Devotion to Amitabha led to creation of a sect that is called Pure Land sect. In Japan, it is called Jodo. Pure Land was present in Japan as early as the Asuka period, that is the beginning of Buddhism in Japan, the 6th century. The first known reference to larger Sukhavati View Sutra, Dai Muryo Jukyo, appears in the writings of the prince Shotoku Taishi, who had a firm belief in the paradise of Amitabha and Maitreya. A mandala was made that is called Tenju Koku Mandara. It was created in the memory of the prince Shotoku Taishi. It is the first example of visualization of Pure Land. Sukhavati View Sutra was recited at the court in Japan for the first time in AD 640. The sects that developed around Amitabha in Japan are called Jodo Shu and Jodo Shinshu. Jodo sect is based on the philosophy of Sukhavati View Sutra, Amitayur Buddhanusmriti Sutra, and Sukhavati View Sutra translated by Kumarajiva. It was quite common to the priests to study the sutras and use the concept of Amitabha as an object of meditation during the Nara period. A priest of the Sanron sect came from China in 640 and soon he delivered a lecture on larger Sukhavati View Sutra and related works at a vegetarian repast held at Kudara Daichi temple. Another monk of the same sect shared the devotion and he is known to have created a Jodo Mandara. Pure Land Sutras formed a popular subject and study. Different sutras were recognized as authorities by various sects. Generally speaking, Amitabha was worshipped in two different manifestations: as an ideal Buddha, Ributsu, and as a living personality preaching in the Western paradise. Belief in Jodo, the Pure Land, heavenly bliss of this paradise, seems to have been budded forth in the early years of the Hakuho period. After the demise of the prince Shotoku Taishi, his consort ordered a pair of large embroideries representing the paradise to which the dead prince's soul was presumed to have migrated. Today, only fragments of these embroideries are known as Tenju Koku Mandara. They survive today in Choguji Nunnery at the Horyoji monastery. It bears an inscription containing the wish of the prince Shotoku Taishi for a happy rebirth in Tenju Koku. The fact suggests existence of the concept of Sukhavati, but the Jodo concept of this period seems to be a bit vague. Suvarna Prabhasa Sutra is another sutra. It's called Komyo Kyo. The sutra was popular during the 8th century. It expounds veneration to the 4 Buddhas. There was a belief that happiness for the living and peace for the dead is there in Sukhavati. Devotion to Amitabha was primarily designed for prosperity in the present life during the Hakuho period. For example, an inscription found on the Amida triad of the Yamato Shirinji temple dated 649 requests happiness for the living and peace for the divine. Lady Tachibana Shrine is a master work of the Hakuho period. The shrine generally is dated 710. It represents a view of the paradise of Amitabha, wherein you can see Amitabha sitting on a lotus emerging out of a pond, attended by 2 bodhisattvas. His right hand is in Semui hand posture, or you can call it reassurance mudra, while his left hand is in the yogan or wish granting posture. The 2 bodhisattvas stand on lotuses. Behind them on a screen are the 7 Buddhas and the souls of the departed and those who are reborn in the Sukhavati. They are sitting on lotus buds or flowers. Their faces are full of joyous spirituality. Their draperies swirl upward with the lotus stems. The paradise of Amitabha in Horyuji, painted on the western wall of its golden hall in 8th century, presents almost the similar view of Sukhavati. Amitabha is sitting on a huge lotus emerging out of a pond. The 2 bodhisattvas, Avalokiteshvara and Mahasthama Prapta, they flank him. Departed souls sit again on the lotus flowers. A number of images of Amitabha with his attending bodhisattvas were sculpted during the Nara period. For example, Amida triad in the Treasure Gallery, Horyuji, and Amida triad kept in the National Museum, Tokyo. Nara period saw further increase in the devotion of Amitabha. Empress Gomyo, she lived in the first half of the 8th century, was a strong believer in the Pure Land faith. 7 days after her death, an edict was issued throughout the country to make copies of the Pure Land and copy related sutras and send them to all the provinces. In 761, a temple in the Kofukuji confines was built in her memory.